So funny story. I scripted this entire video. I scripted the whole thing. And yet I'm not using that script. I scripted the entire thing. And then I reread it. I read it out loud. And I deleted it because it sounded no better than me just rambling. I know I made a promise that I was going to do the rest of these scripted. But I don't like scripting. I don't like it. And I know I could just make bullet points, but when I make bullet points, I end up just scripting. And, which I guess is alright, but like, I don't know. And I even thought about it because I'm like, okay, I could either script out this entire video again and make it more coherent, because the other one, I kept jumping back and forth and it was all over the place. And I'm like, how did I do this with scripting? This sounds worse than when I was rambling. Or it sounds just as bad as when I was rambling. But I considered it. But then I decided, you know what? In all honesty, making these videos where I just ramble and I just speak my mind and I try to talk, and if I can listen to what people tell me about my rambling and what about it? Like, I know one of the criticisms I got was like I repeated things a bit too much. Like, I kept repeating things. I say a lot. That's the thing I personally have noticed. But I realized that in the long run, this actually might be kind of handy to me, because if I could teach myself to ramble well enough to where I don't need a script, not only could I possibly be funnier, but it might also help me in certain social situations. So, I don't know. I'm going to try doing more of these unscripted and see what happens. Plus, not to mention, these are topics I'm very passionate about, and I feel like you can feel that more, and you get more of me when I ramble. When I script, these aren't really even meant to be like super formal, professionally made videos. They're just videos where I can just dump all my thoughts out, where I can just let it all out. But anyway, that was too long. So yeah, I didn't script this one, so I'm sorry. But I made the thing about Mary Sue's, and I thought to myself, okay, I want to make more of these because it's something I'm passionate about, and I think this is something that could be super fun to do, to continue doing. So it's like, okay, what is the second most clickbaitiest title I could possibly use? Because Mary Sue's was the most clickbaitiest title I could possibly have used, which is why I used it for my first one. So then I sat there and I thought, okay, what's the second most clickbaity title? Edgy characters! But then I thought that was too obvious, so I just decided against it, and I was like, you know what, let's just go with self-inserts and leave edgy characters for another day. So here we are. Self-inserts, everybody. So, in the Mary Sue's video, I alluded a lot to self-inserts, and I talked a little bit on what a self-insert was and stuff like that. And I mentioned it with like our infamous Mary Sue example, Bella Swan. I mentioned how the author herself even said that she was a self-insert, that Bella Swan is basically me, and so I kind of touched on it briefly. So I thought, you know what, it really would make half bad a topic to continue on with and make the second little episode thing about, because I mean, hey, continuity, am I right? But yeah, so this is something, it's gonna be a kind of weird, because I have a weird opinion on self-inserts. A lot of people are like, either like, just let people make self-inserts, it's not that big of a deal. And other people are like, no, they're the most horrible thing you could ever do in fiction ever, or non-fiction, or anything. And I'm weirdly on the fence about it, because I kind of have a bit of a both in mind. And it's purely contextual. In fact, something you'll find as I continue the series, whatever, is a very common phrase you're going to hear me say, is that context matters, and that it depends, and that anything can work in writing if done right. Or not writing, but just storytelling in general, and art, storytelling, anything. Anything can work if executed right. And this applies to self-inserts, so you're going to hear that logic a lot, but I have a weird sort of relationship with self-inserts. If you don't know what a self-insert is, it's basically when an author or creator inserts themselves into a story that they're trying to tell, usually in fiction, and you'll often see it more often in more like fandom related stuff, which oftentimes self-inserts and Mary Sues are thrown together in the same mixing bowl. However, these terms are not interchangeable. I just want to say that because a lot of people seem to think self-insert immediately equals Mary Sue, and a lot of people think, oh, they're a Mary Sue, they must be a self-insert, which is not always the case. They are very commonly found together, but they are not interchangeable. They are not the same thing. It's not like you can't have one without the other. They're standalone terms that just so happen to often find each other again and again and again and again. And also, I don't know what I'm putting in the background of this video. I'm getting some ideas while I'm talking, but look in the description if you want to know I'm drawing. But random side note. Anyway, back to my thoughts. So what's also really funny, though, too, is I see a lot of people who bash and shame upon self-inserts and think they're terrible, and yet seem totally fine or even have their own persona. So if you don't know what a persona is basically, you'll typically find it amongst artists, is a character of some kind that is meant to represent themselves. For example, my persona is TheZodiacLord in a sense, which is, I guess he's a character, I suppose. In a sense, he's just me, but fancier, basically. But there's also, like, personas within fandoms as well. For example, you have, like, in My Little Pony, you can have your pony-sona. In flippin' fur with furries, you can have a fur-sona. With Steven Universe characters, you can have gem-sonas, or if you want to make a human on Beach City, you can have a beach-sona. There's sonas for, like, all this other kind of stuff, and they're called personas. Yet, now that I've just explained that to you, do they not sound very similar? In all honesty, they're both projections of the author into a character that, in a sense, is cooler than them in a way, Because if you go look around and you find everyone's personas, do the personas ever look exactly like the actual person? In all honesty, like, there are some people who do kind of use more of just themselves, but most of the time you'll find people, but they don't call that their persona, they just call that themselves, So, aren't personas literally just self-inserts? Just some food for thought there. Just some food for thought as I continue. So, my stance on self-inserts are kind of wishy-washy in a sense. It very much depends, because I think self-inserts are harmless, really. And I think in a lot of ways, most self-inserts are typically just kids having fun a lot of the time, or it's just anybody having fun. I know that with my best friend, we'll make up stories all the time off the top of our heads of like, hey, what if we were in this scenario? What if we were superheroes? What if we were in a fantasy world? I know we have one where, like, my best friend and I were like thieves or rogues or bandits or whatever, and we ended up accidentally kidnapping a princess who was our other friend, and it was a whole thing, like, and we do that all the time. So in all honesty, I really don't like seeing people getting so wrapped up when they find a character that is a self-insert, because most of the time it's purely for fun. It's not like the person's trying to make just trying to make a legitimate character and they think it's the best. It's just for fun usually. And again, it's different if it's different if the person's being an ass about it and is like, my character's the best in the world and all that other kind of stuff. But just from a standpoint, self-inserts by themselves are really harmless. Now, here's where it kind of flips around. Because I think from a legitimate writing standpoint, The only time a self-insert is good is when you don't even know it's a self-insert, because it's such an interesting and compelling character that you'd never even know unless you were like very personal friends and knew the creator personally. You know? In fact, the moment you can tell a character is a self-insert without being told it is, then we have a problem. But from a legitimate writing standpoint, to me, self-inserts are a very bad thing to lean on. Now, that's not to say basing a character off of yourself or people in your life is a bad thing, because it's not. A good writer can know how to realize their own flaws, or be willing not to stick so strictly that it must be them or it must be this person they're basing it off of. They know how to expand on that. They know how to pick out their flaws and their strengths and that kind of stuff. I mean, for an example, to have a real life example, Alex Hirsch, who made Gravity Falls, Dipper and Pines, from what I know, were based on his, I don't remember, someone in his family. The Pines twins were based off of people in his family. So, you know, they're obviously not inherently bad, because you would have no one would have ever been able to know unless he told you. So a skilled writer can really make that kind of stuff work. However, a very common trend I see amongst self-inserts is that very often they're just boring. You know, they're just, or not even just boring, but just not as interesting as other characters in whatever narrative that they're in. You know? And again, it goes back to like the most interesting characters, if they're a self-insert, you're not going to know. While as opposed to like a really flat character, you're typically kind of got to figure it out, you know? But I don't even know what it is, and maybe this is just me being weird, but for some reason, a lot of self-inserts I find, they just don't pique my interest that much. And it's not because they're a self-insert, but it's just because they seem boring to me, and I don't know why. There's just like something about them that just feels like they're missing something. For a lot of them, not all of them, of course. There are a lot of self-insert characters I find that are just like any other character, and they're compelling and interesting. Same thing with like, and this goes for personas as well, because because if you couldn't tell, I kind of consider personas and self-inserts kind of on the same level here. But it goes for personas too. There's a lot of, in fact, you know what? It goes for my own personas too. If anyone follows me on DA, whenever I draw, when do I ever draw my own personas? Like, never. I draw myself occasionally when I feel like it, I guess, or if it's for a joke drawing. I haven't drawn myself in a long time. I don't hardly draw, like, Moonstone and Sunstone, my two Steven Universe characters with my brother. I hardly ever draw them. Hardly ever. And I mean, then again, I haven't been drawing my gems that much lately in general, but for some reason, and that's why I think this could possibly be a me thing. For some reason, I just don't find most self-inserts or personas that interesting at all. It gets to a point where I see such a common trend that I feel like it just comes with it, just that self-inserts typically aren't as interesting. And so I suggest, when making a legitimate story that you want to be interesting, that you want to be intriguing, that you want to captivate audiences with, avoid using self-inserts. Now, that's not to say you couldn't use your own personality as a basis for something, or use your own personality to figure out your own characters, but I would recommend staying away from keeping a character strictly based on yourself. Because it takes quite a bit of a finesse to make it work, and I think, honestly, you will have a lot more fun if you try creating characters and relating to them, relating with people that you basically make up. As weird as that sounds. As crazy as that sounds, too. But, you know, I think that and I mean, if you are doing it because you have fun, that's totally different. And in that case, go have fun. That's something I think needs to be encouraged a lot more when it comes to character creation. Is just go have fun. In fact, you know what? Let me just take a step back too. If you're writing a legitimate story and you want your character to be to self-insert, I don't recommend it, But if you want to, like, you really want to, and that's what's going to be fun for you, do it. Like, honestly, do it. That goes for most things with characters. That even goes back to my Mary Sue thing. If you want to make a Mary Sue, and you consciously know it's a Mary Sue, or you know people are going to think they're a Mary Sue, but you don't care, go for it. Like, really, just go. Be free. Spread your creative wings to the heavens and stuff. I mean, that's just a whole other topic of just, I swear, every time I make any kind of video, I get, like, other ideas of what to talk about. I mean, hell, that's another reason why this rambling thing is good. It gives me so much other ideas. But that's something that just needs to be encouraged more in general. Have fun with your stories. Like, go. In fact, that's another thing, too. To me, and again, could be a totally personal thing, but self-inserts to me, just to relate this back, self-inserts to me, you have a lot of limits. Because if you're trying to make them like yourself, then you can only really do so much. Because you have to figure out your own weaknesses and your own flaws. But you can't really go beyond that. When you make up people, and you just make people that are just, they don't exist, you just make them, you have so much more room to do whatever you want, you know? You don't have the limits of keeping it like yourself, or having to, you know, like, I had a word and I lost it. Like, you don't have to keep it like yourself, and you don't have to rely so strictly on yourself to make the character interesting. You can spread your wings a lot more because they're not real. They don't have to react in perfectly real ways. I know a lot of people say you have to keep your characters super relatable and stuff, but really you don't. You can have a lot of fun just making your characters quirky and like funny and different and unique and weird and all this other kind of stuff, and creepy and strange and na. And I believe personally that self-inserts do kind of limit that a little bit, because you're so focused on what are you like, what would you do, that it kind of just makes it a little not boring because you yourself are boring, but boring because you can't exaggerate as much, you know? And again, a talented writer can do this well. I mean, I'm Homestuck trash. Andrew Hussey, he just added to his own comic. It was just literally himself in his own comic. It was great. But anyway, so other people who've read it know what I'm talking about. But yeah, so this is too long. Goodness. This is the one downside. I just go on for too long. But yeah, so my advice, just to summarize everything. If you're doing it for fun and you're making self-inserts because you want to have fun, you want to imagine yourself in a world, do it. They're practically personas. Go have fun. You know, just go be free. Spread your wings. But if you want to create a legitimate story and you want like real good writing advice, I don't even know if my writing advice is that totally good, but I personally, myself, would recommend avoiding it. Not to say you can't do it, because there's not really any can'ts in writing and storytelling. But I would strongly say try not to. Or if you're going to, be willing to break the rules a little bit with what you're doing, and don't try and keep it so anchored to you yourself. And then lastly, have fun with writing. That's the moral of the story for all these videos. Go have fun and explore and be free. I keep saying that now, but like, go be your creative self. Make your bad characters, because a good writer will learn from making bad characters. Trust me. But yeah, so I rambled on way too long. But if you enjoyed this, please leave a like. Please comment below with your thoughts. I love, one of my favorite things about that thing about Mary Sue's video, like I said, it was hearing all the different thoughts and opinions, hearing the people who agreed with me or added on to what I was saying, the people who politely disagreed with me and gave their thoughts in a polite manner, all this kind of stuff, you know? It was fascinating to me. So please leave a like with your thoughts. You can agree or disagree with me. I don't care. I'm open to all of it. But just my only rule, I don't care whether you agree with me or disagree with me, don't go flaming people. That's the only thing I ask. But yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this. Leave a like if you did, if you want to subscribe for more content from me. And I will see you in the next video, whatever it may be. Zodiac out.